Thank you very much. Just before starting this presentation, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference. And my gratitude is also going to Professor Cooperty. She has always opened me her door, her table, and give me the opportunity of talking about history with her and with Yaron, and I am very rich of that moment. Thank you so much. This conference in honor of Professor Tzur is for me a wonderful opportunity to offer him a comparative reflection concerning the migration of the Jews from Algeria during and after the War of Independence. In talking about comparative reflection, I want, as a specialist of the history of the French public policy of repatriation, to compare what France and what the young state of Israel were offering of the French of Algeria. Most of them were members of a middle class at the moment they became migrants. I will try to think with the viewpoints of our friend Yaron, the theory of sectors, to enlighten the very peculiar migration of the Jews from Algeria, which hasn't been built enough in comparing French and Israeli archives. Before going further in that presentation, I would like to mention three methodological propositions. My first proposition is to get around what we call in French le nationalisme méthodologique, the methodological nationalism. As an historian of migration, I would like to say that the question concerning the Algerian Jews at the end of the French Empire is not why they didn't come to Israel, but rather how in a situation of migration they have, in their majority, chosen to settle in France. I intimately believe in that case, that a question starting by a why is not convenient, because it's dissimulating all the historical process in which Algerian Jews in a situation of migration have decided to settle in metropolitan France. Moreover, going to France is not telling us anything about their religiosity, and is not telling us anything also against their believing in the Zionist movement. The second proposition I make is that for understanding a mass migration, we must use the concept built by social geography of migratory project. How a decision to leave a place has been built and has possibly changed during the migration. We can understand the sequence of the Algerian Jews migration in few details, mostly in the administrative circulars. And in these circulars, we will understand why the Jews, in this Israeli and French circular, we will understand why all the Algerian, or most of the Jews from Algeria, have been to metropolitan France. The third proposition I would make to you today is that we must rethink the chronology. A very important study has been published in France last year by Patrick Boucheron, Une histoire mondiale de la France, a worldwide French history. All the authors of that book are proposing a new chronology of France, trying to deconstruct what we are used to call the roman national, the national novel. In that study, Boucheron is inviting us to think new historical moments, to build new historical frame, and to rethink the past. Okay, after these few propositions, let's go to the point. Israel, in its essence, is a country of migration, mostly for the Jewish people, and has received population in situation of great poverty. At the time of the Jews from Algeria could have come, or could have started to build a project for Aliyah, Israel was receiving Jews from Morocco, Egypt, Libya, and if the Zionist activities in Algeria didn't stop after the assassination by the FLN of two members of the Sortnut in 1958. The Zionism didn't disappear from Algeria, but the Zionism didn't open the road to Israel. On the other hand, France was also a country of migration. I mean, from Algeria. On the other hand, France was also a country of migration, and the roads of metropole for the Jews from Algeria were very old. But France didn't want the Jews from Algeria to come, and whatever, it was not especially against the Jews, but it was especially against all the French living in Algeria. And France just started to build a policy of integration just in 1961. In spite of that, they have all gone to metropolitan France. We all know the process of republicanization of the Algerian Jews. We all know how, in their great majority, they have entered in the Roman National with all its asperities. And I don't want to talk about that. In honor of Professor Tzur for his contribution to our field of research, I would like to enlighten what I call the moment 1957-1958, during whom the feeling of belonging to the European sectors has been reactivated. So let's watch first this moment, 1957-1958. How the French Jews in Algeria have started to watch the horizon of metropolitan France. We know, of course, that the French were very attached to the Republic. I don't want to talk about that. We know it all. We know also that in the moment they start to build their migratory project, they were watching very carefully what was happening in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, and all the countries of the Mashrek. And the conscience that it will be more and more difficult for the Jews start to live in Algeria, of course, start to happen. Second moment is the War of Algeria. After la bataille d'Alger, the Battle of Alger, the Jewish communities in Algeria were more and more under the fire of the FLN. Facing the violence of the war, in 1957, all the small Jewish rural communities in Algeria have moved to the towns. Benjamin Heller, who was the president of the Algerian Jewish communities in Algeria, was in contact permanent with the Secretary of State of Algeria, Sidi Shifkara, and was all the time explaining how all the small communities, the small Jewish communities, were disappearing after every day. It was the case in Msila, it was the case on every small villages. And in the same time, Benjamin Heller started to write a lot of letters to the consistoire, the French consistoire, to ask him for more solidarity of the Jews from metropolitan France for the Jews of Algeria. And the consistoire has answered him. Symbolically first, the synagogue des Tournelles has been given to the Constantine Rite in 1958. In spite of the opposition of Raymond Aron and Vladimir Yankelevich, this synagogue, very major in the place of Paris, became to be an Algerian synagogue. More important, the Metropolitan Consistoire was deeply involved in the French politics. If you go to the archive of the Consistoire, you will see a lot of letters, maybe more than 500 letters written to Président du Conseil and after the beginning of the Fifth Republic to Prime Minister and of course to President of the Republic to assure that the Décret Crémieux in case of independence will not be cancelled. And it's very interesting to see that this fear, because the Décret Crémieux has been cancelled just few years before, it has been putting back in 1943, that each time a prime minister, each time a président du conseil, each time a minister of interior was answering that yes, the Décret Crémieux will be permanent to Rothschild or to the president of the consistoire or whatever members, these letters were directly go to Algeria in every small communities to assure them that France will be all the time on their side. And at the end of this confirmation process, I call it like this, at the end of this confirmation process, the French citizenship has been extended in 1961 to all the Jews living in the Mzab area. France organized their civil registration and also an air bridge to transfer them into metropolitan France. So this moment, 1957-1958, is the moment where the membership of the European sectors have been reactivated. And it's extremely important for me to talk about it. Let's talk now about what's happened in Israel and what was the question of the Sochnut and the Israeli state about the middle-class Olim. Of course, the young country of Israel was very interested in receiving middle-class Olim. In the moment where the Jews of Algeria were building their migratory project, Israel was receiving people in great poverty from Egypt, from Morocco, from Libya, etc. And having migrants who will be professionally independent is really, really, really looking for by the Sochnut. But little by little, of this possibility of the middle class Olim to come to Israel, or maybe the possibility of the Olim from middle class from Algeria to come to Israel, has been cancelled. Till 1955, the Olim could import goods without paying tax in Israel till an amount to $25,000. But in order to protect the Israeli companies, this amount has been reduced to $3,500. It was here the first attack, sorry for the quote, sorry for the word, it's in quote of course, it was here the first attack given to the Aliyah of independent Olim, who didn't want to pay tax for setting their business in Israel. Nevertheless, the 24th Zionist Congress in April and May 1956 had underlined the importance of a middle-class Aliyah. Following that, an Israeli program has been built for encouraging the Aliyah of craftsmen and shopkeepers. The 1st July 1957, the Economic Department of the Sochnut, with the Ministry of Finance, started a new program for the Olim who would settle their shop and their enterprise in the country. Till the amount of $10,000, the Olim would receive an important help from the Israeli state. They receive 700 prutot for each dollar invested in Israel, 350 prutot for each dollar changed into Israeli lirot, and it was also working for the francs, and 350 prutot for each dollar in a form of an interest-free loan for 3 years. In this program, extremely new, innovator, important, maybe one of the most important programs which has been built to insert a migrant in the world, there was also a special additional help for Olim coming from poor countries. It's hard to understand if, in the eyes of the Sochnut, Algeria is poor country or is France. But what I see in the archive is that sometimes it's poor, sometimes it's France, but whatever, this program is quite able to give opportunities to the Jewish from middle class living in Algeria. In that precise moment, the Olim in Algeria start to watch the horizon of Israel. But it didn't work. Why? Because first, the program of the Aliyah for middle class has been surrounded by a lot of conflicts in the Sochnut, between the Sochnut and the Misrad HaKlita, and between the Sochnut and the Misrad HaKlita and the Ministry of Finance. The Sochnut was complaining that the Klita was overlapping its prerogatives. And after a long and cold conflict during 13 months, the 16th July 1958, while Shragai who was the head of the Klita, was abroad, this program has been cancelled, and the help of the Olim who were arriving or at the point to come to Israel have been frozen. In 1 month, more than 1,000 Olim stopped their process to enter into migration. It was here clearly the second stop given to the development of middle-class Aliyah, and especially a middle-class Aliyah from Algeria. After that, in August 1958, the Sochnut and the Ministry of Finance proposed a new program called 1,000 Families. In fact, it will work for 100 families. And this new program was giving a 10 years free loan help. And that's all. It's interesting to see that in the same moment, at the beginning of 1960-1961, the Ministry of Interior in France was asking to every French who were leaving Algeria where they would go when they were taking a plane or when they were taking a boat. Around 19,000 people have answered this survey. Around 2,000 persons declare going to Israel. It was absolutely nothing, but 2,000 and 18,000 declared to go in Israel. And what is very important for me is that in these 2,000, 62% were Olim with Moroccan nationality. So it means clearly they were living in Oran. In Oran there was a strong Zionist activities, but it was now, after this program of delaying the middle class aliyah, was only talking, or in the majority talking, to people from with Moroccan nationality. Third moment, and I will go quick, I have no idea where I've got time.
Another 5.
Perfect. The third moment is 1962. France didn't want it at all, the French from Algeria, to come. But in a moment, they didn't have choice. So a very important law have been voted the 26th December 1961. And this law started to build a very important policy of reintegration for the French repatriated from Algeria. Just a little quote, when I'm talking about the French, it means the people who were Jewish, with the Décret Crémieux, the people who were Europeans, and of course the people who were Jewish and Europeans, but no declaring any religion. It was excluding the Muslim people. So the 26th December 1961, a new policy of integration has been built by France for all these migrants, very close to what was the first program of the Sornout. The French government was not happy, but was very involved in building a program of reintegration of these people in a social and political perspective of regulation. It's very hard for me to explain you what it was, but in few sentences. First, every Olim independent who were arriving in France after December 1961 received 1 year of salary. It's extremely important to say why. 1 year of salary, because they wanted the middle-class Olim to settle in the same situation they used to have in Algeria and not to take the first job they would have found as a worker in Renault, for example, or whatever. So France was fighting against social declassification like this. Of course, you will never see a French repatriated from Algeria going to live into bidonville. It's always hard for me to translate, but let's translate it into Mahabara or something like this. Immediately, France organized a policy of reintegration in a household immediately. Nobody went into bidonville. There were bidonville in every city in France. It was not the case. The transition was always done in, I would say, hard building, not in shanty towns. We can talk about every 800 laws we have been voted for reinstallation of people, but the idea was this one. What you had in Algeria, you will find it back into France. So the state bought officine, Bet Mercarat to the pharmacist, French, and also the stocks. France bring back all zero credit, a lot of credit with no, with free loan to every shopkeeper, to every craft keeper, and France also bought back the stocks they lost in Algeria. I wouldn't like to say that the people who decided to come to live in France and not to Israel were only pragmatic. But I want also to say that they didn't have the choice. Because in a circular, there is a very specific sentence. Every people living in Algeria and spending 3 months abroad, in Italy, in Spain, in Israel, or wherever, would immediately lose the help of the state. So in a way, having compensation for the lost flats, for the lost buildings, for the lost cars, also for the lost tomb. When you are studying an application form of compensation, people are asking for compensation with their tombs they left behind, or whatever. You couldn't have lived somewhere else than in France when you left Algeria. Conclusion. We, historians, what can we do after this major theory of sectors built by Professor Zur? It's obvious that concerning the migration of North African Jews, this theory is giving us essential keys to understand the post-colonial migrations. From my point of view, working under the light of Yaron Zur consists in the following proposition. As the theory of sector is essential, we have to study how it has been reactivated or not in various contexts and spaces. For me, this theory of sectors is exactly like the notion of identity. The membership of sectors is not permanent and is susceptible to change all the time. The work of an historian is from now on to study the condition of its reactivation or its abandon. Moreover, as an historian of migration, I'm used to say to my students that the concept of migratory project and migration field built by geography and sociology are essential. But in the case of North African migration, they have to be completed by the theory of sectors. It's not so common that historians build concepts. The sin of anachronism can easily come, and Professor Zur avoid with great talent that trick. In that way, I'm very proud to tell him that with my student in France, he's not only studied by historians, but also like a boomerang by geographers and sociologists. A last word, but in French. Merci.